A 10-year-old boy lived in a shed for 2 years, until a black billionaire yelled, "Let him go! Let him go!" The voice came like thunder cracking open the sky, sharp and commanding, the kind of voice that made people freeze, not just because of its authority, but because of the man who said it. Lennox King didn't shout often. He didn't have to. But when he did, people listened. And standing in the overgrown backyard of a run-down suburban house in Evanston, Illinois, in a designer coat dusted with pollen and rage, his words struck the air like a verdict. Carol Whitmore, mid-50s, carefully curled hair, pearl earrings glinting in the sunlight, jerked around at the sound of his voice. Her hand still hovered above the padlock on the rust-eaten shed. Her mouth opened, likely to deliver a sweet-sounding lie. But the moment had shattered. Behind Lennox stood Royce, his longtime driver and security aide, holding up a phone. The camera was already rolling. There was a shuffle from within the shed. A dry, brittle cough. Then a small voice, no louder than the wind. "Please!" It was enough. Lennox strode forward without hesitation. His steps crunched across the grass, dried and brittle. Royce didn't move, but his presence loomed. 6'5" and ex-military. He didn't have to say a word. "Sir," Carol said, regaining her voice, trying for indignation. "This is private property. You can't just walk onto someone's land and make demands. I'm calling the police." Lennox didn't stop. "Call whoever you need." "I'm opening this shed." "That's my nephew in there," she snapped. "He's troubled, emotional." "This is for his own good." He reached the padlock. 2 years in a wooden box? That's not parenting. "That's prison." She tried to block him, stepping in front, but Royce was already there. Just a gentle hand on her shoulder, firm, but not aggressive. Lennox bent, unlocked the rusted padlock with a small bolt cutter Royce had handed him seconds earlier, and yanked the door wide open. The smell hit him instantly. Mold, rot, something acrid and sickening. The kind of stench that settled in your throat and refused to leave. The boy inside blinked against the sudden light. 10 years old, rail thin, skin pale under layers of dirt, his dark curls matted to his head, knees drawn to his chest. Barefoot. He didn't flinch, didn't cry. Just stared. "My name's Lennox," the man said, kneeling. "I'm here to help." The boy's mouth opened. "You're real? As real as it gets, kid." Behind them, Carol finally broke. "He lies. He tells stories to make me look bad." "He never listens. He's difficult. You don't know what he's like." "Lady," Lennox said without turning around. "I know exactly what he's like. He's scared. He's hungry. And he's not your victim anymore." Police sirens echoed faintly in the distance. 2 hours earlier, Lennox hadn't planned to be there. He was in town to inspect a stalled community center project. But something about Sycamore Street had called to him. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was intuition. Or maybe it was the marble. That marble. A swirl of blue and yellow glass, scuffed but intact, had rolled across the sidewalk from under the shed while he walked past. He'd picked it up, curious. When he knelt to inspect where it came from, he'd seen the shadow move. Just for a second. Now, as he reached into the shed, the boy crawled toward him, legs trembling. Lennox swept him up, blanket and all. The boy's name was Leo. Leo Barrett. He didn't weigh much more than a backpack. "Royce," Lennox said, eyes on Carol. "Get the car." "Bring a blanket, and tell the police we'll wait." "You're kidnapping him!" Carol screamed. "You'll regret this!" "No," Lennox said as he walked past her, Leo's head resting on his shoulder. "The only one regretting anything today is you." By the time the cops arrived, neighbors had already gathered. Phones recorded. Carol tried to act outraged, clutching her chest like a victim in a soap opera. Lennox ignored her. He sat on the hood of the black Escalade, holding Leo wrapped in 2 blankets. The boy hadn't let go of the marble. His tiny hand clutched it like a lifeline. Detective Paul Whitmore, no relation, stepped out of the cruiser. Mid-40s, built like a linebacker, expression carved from granite. "You the one who called this in?" he asked. "I am," Lennox replied. "This child's been living in that shed for God knows how long. His legal guardian is Carol Whitmore. I recommend you get a warrant, check the house, and talk to CPS." "Sir," Whitmore said, eyes narrowing, as he recognized the billionaire. "Mr. King, this gonna become a media circus?" "It already is," Lennox said. "You gonna help or just stand there?" The detective nodded to an officer. "Get statements. Start recording." Carol launched into another tirade. How Leo was unstable, how she had sacrificed everything, but her voice fell flat. Because Leo finally spoke. "She said I'd die out there," he whispered. That silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Later, as the cruiser took Carol away, Lennox sat in the back seat of the Escalade with Leo curled against him. He didn't talk much, just let the boy breathe. At a red light, Royce glanced in the mirror. "You sure you want to take this on, sir? Once your name's in this, it's in it for good." "I don't care," Lennox said. "This kid didn't ask for a damn thing except to be seen. We're seeing him now." Leo shifted. "Are you gonna take me somewhere?" "Yes." "To the hospital, then somewhere warm, safe." "Is it far?" "No." "It's close." Leo stared out the window. "You saw me." Lennox reached for his hand. "Yeah, I did. And this time, no one would look away." The fluorescent lights of the emergency room buzzed faintly overhead, casting a pale wash over everything. The smell of antiseptic and bleach hung heavy in the air, but to Leo, it was better than mildew and mouse droppings, better than fear. He sat on the hospital bed, wrapped in 2 layers of fresh, warm blankets. His fingers gripped a juice box, but he hadn't touched it. His eyes were wide, darting to every corner of the room, as if expecting someone, something, to grab him and pull him back. Lennox King sat close by, legs spread, elbows on his knees, watching the boy. He hadn't said much since they arrived, not because he didn't have questions, but because he knew when to wait. Across the room, the attending physician, Dr. Angela Brody, finished reviewing Leo's preliminary chart. She was in her early 50s, no nonsense, but compassionate. Her eyes told the story her voice didn't. "He's severely underweight, mild hypothermia, dehydrated, a respiratory infection that's likely been untreated for weeks, maybe longer. There are bruises on his arms and shoulders, some old, some new, and a welt on the side of his head." Lennox exhaled slowly. "Is it safe for him to stay here tonight?" "Yes. We've already called Child Protective Services. A social worker is on the way. He'll be moved to a temporary placement after he's stabilized. I want to sponsor his care." Dr. Brody raised a brow. "That's generous, but why you? You related?" Lennox glanced at Leo. "No, but I saw him." The doctor nodded, her eyes softening. "Then thank you." When she stepped out, Lennox turned back to the boy. "Hey, Leo, you want me to stay until you fall asleep?" Leo hesitated. "You don't have to." "I'm not a baby." "No, you're not. But you're still allowed to want someone close by." Leo looked away. "You're the first person to ask." Lennox didn't respond to that. He just stayed. The room settled into a thick, loaded quiet. Then, After a long pause, Leo spoke again.
She said nobody wanted me.
Who? Lennox asked gently, though he already knew. Leo's voice was a whisper.
Aunt Carol.
She said I was a burden, that I ruined her life. Lennox stood up, walked to the window, and let out a breath he'd been holding. She's wrong. You don't know me. I know you deserve better. Leo blinked.
Do you think my parents would still love me even now?
Lennox turned. His throat tightened, but he didn't let it show.
Leo, your parents would have burned the world down to find you.
And I'm pretty sure they'd be grateful to anyone who helped finish the job. Leo stared at him for a moment, as if weighing that answer. Then, for the first time, his shoulders relaxed slightly. A few minutes later, a knock on the door broke the silence.
A petite black woman in her mid-30s stepped in, wearing a navy blazer and a CPS badge clipped to her waist. Her name tag read, Maria Tompkins. I'm with Child Protective Services, she said softly.
Is it okay if I speak with Leo? Lennox stood. If he's comfortable. Leo nodded faintly. Maria crouched down beside the bed, her voice soft and careful.
Hi, Leo. I'm here to make sure you're safe and that we can find you a place to stay where people care about you. Can I ask you a few questions?
Leo nodded again, but his hands clenched tighter around the blanket.
Can you tell me a little bit about how long you were living in the shed?
He hesitated.
2 years, I think.
Maria blinked.
Do you remember when you started living there? It was after my parents' accident. Aunt Carol said her house was too small, said I needed to be out of the way.
Maria swallowed, steadying her voice.
Did she ever hurt you?
Leo paused, then whispered, Only when I talked back, or asked for food. Lennox clenched his fists so hard his knuckles popped. Maria glanced at Lennox, then back at the boy.
You were very brave to tell me that. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you're never hurt again. I promise.
Leo looked at her like he didn't quite believe it. But he didn't pull away. That night, after Maria left to file her report and CPS finalized Leo's temporary placement, Lennox lingered by the bed. I'll come see you tomorrow, he said. You'll be safe with the family they're sending you to. Leo sat up. Are you leaving now? Lennox hesitated. Do you want me to stay until you fall asleep? A tiny nod. Lennox pulled up the chair and sat, not saying anything, just breathing, letting the boy know someone was there. Outside the hospital, the storm had already started. A neighbor had uploaded the footage of Lennox yelling in Carol's backyard. The clip had gone viral in a matter of hours. The caption read, Billionaire stops to help abused boy, demands action. News stations were already circling. Commentators debated whether it was real, whether it was a publicity stunt. But those closest to the truth knew better. Lennox wasn't looking for headlines. He was hunting justice. And as he looked at the frail boy drifting into sleep beside him, he made a silent vow. He would not rest. Not until everyone who failed Leo was exposed. Not until every child like him had someone to speak their name loud enough for the world to hear. This wasn't charity. It was war. 3 days after Leo was rescued, the media frenzy was already impossible to ignore. Lennox King wasn't the kind of man who usually gave interviews. In fact, he had built his fortune, his legacy, and his privacy on the principle of staying quiet while making power moves behind closed doors. But something about this case had cracked something open in him, something old, buried deep, now impossible to ignore. He stood in the glass atrium of the Evanston Children's Advocacy Center, facing a wall of cameras, microphones, and reporters, all waiting for a soundbite. Instead, they got a warning. This isn't just about Leo Albright. Lennox said, his voice low and clear. This is about every child who's been forgotten. Every system that turned its back. Every adult who looked away. The press hung on every word. But back at the foster home where Leo was now staying, the boy had no idea his face had become the symbol of something much larger. He was curled up on the couch, watching cartoons with the volume turned low. Sarah Mitchell, his temporary foster mother, had just brought him a mug of hot cocoa. She watched from the kitchen, not wanting to crowd him. Her husband, Peter, was fixing the back fence outside. Leo still didn't talk much, but he listened. Every voice, every creak in the floorboards, every shifting shadow near a doorway. The trauma didn't vanish just because the locks had changed. That afternoon, as he sat sketching quietly at the table, the front doorbell rang. Sarah wiped her hands and peeked through the curtain. Then she smiled and opened the door. "Mr. King." "Come in." Lennox stepped inside, removing his coat. He scanned the living room, his eyes settling on Leo. The boy froze for a beat, then looked down at the drawing in his lap. Lennox approached slowly. "Hey, Leo. Mind if I sit?" Leo shrugged, then gave a faint nod. The billionaire pulled out a chair and sat opposite him. On the table was a crude drawing of a house, 4 windows, a roof, and something that looked like a small stick figure behind a barred window. Lennox gently tapped the corner. "Is this the shed?" Leo nodded. "I don't want to forget it, but I don't want to live in it anymore either." "You won't," Lennox said. "Not ever again." Leo looked at him for a moment. "Do you believe in monsters?" Lennox blinked. "What kind of monsters?" "The kind that smile at people but lock you in the dark." Lennox leaned forward. "Yeah, I believe in those." Leo's voice dropped to a whisper. "They don't live under the bed. They live in houses, in courtrooms." And for the first time, Lennox understood just how much this boy had seen. Later that evening, Leo was in his room with the door slightly cracked. He heard Sarah and Lennox talking in the kitchen. "He doesn't sleep much, wakes up crying but doesn't want anyone to see it." Lennox sighed. "Has CPS found any extended family?" "No one willing to step in. His father had one cousin in Oregon, but they declined, said they didn't even know the boy." "Unbelievable." Sarah lowered her voice. "And there's something else. CPS is struggling with the inheritance. Carol burned through most of it. Real estate, travel, clothes. She transferred a large chunk to an offshore account. It's all being investigated, but recovering it could take years." Lennox didn't hesitate. "I'll cover everything he needs. School, therapy. Legal. I've got a full-time team on this now. I don't care what it costs." Sarah looked at him for a long moment. "Why him, Mr. King? Why this boy?" He paused, then said softly, "Because I used to be him." The words hung in the air. Back in his room, Leo's heart pounded. He didn't understand the full conversation, but he'd caught enough. Lennox knew. Somehow, he knew what it felt like to be discarded, to be shut out. It made the man feel less like a hero and more like someone real. The next morning, Lennox walked into the law office of Naomi Ellis, a fierce, sharp-tongued civil rights attorney known for suing cities into submission. He placed a folder on her desk. "I want to sue the state, the school district." "Anyone who knew about that shed and said nothing." Naomi flipped through the file. "That's a long list. You ready for that storm?" "I am the storm." Naomi smirked. "That's why I like working with you." As they plotted the legal strategy, Lennox's team dug deeper. They uncovered documents, emails, voicemails. A school counselor had flagged Leo's sudden disappearance. A pediatrician had reported concerns about neglect during one of Carol's early visits with Leo.
A neighbor had once called CPS anonymously, but was never followed up with. All swept under the rug.
All damning. The twist came 2 days later. One of Lennox's investigators found a judge who'd expedited Leo's guardianship papers, Judge Terence Malone. A man with a long history of sealing family court documents, especially when wealthy or influential adults were involved. But what stood out was the speed. Carol's petition had been approved in under 48 hours, with no home check, no psychological eval, and no inquiry into Leo's welfare.
Lennox stared at the report. "They helped her hide him," he said quietly, and just like that, the fight changed shape.
This wasn't just a rescue, it was about to become an exposure. That night, back at the foster home, Leo asked if he could sleep on the couch. Sarah nodded, tucking a second blanket around him. Just before she turned off the light, Leo looked up. "Do you think the monsters know they've been seen now?" Sarah hesitated. "I think they're starting to." Leo pulled the blanket up to his chin. "Good." And somewhere in a dark office across the city, a judge who thought his secrets were safe picked up a call and heard 6 words that froze him in place. "Lennox King is asking about you." The real storm was coming. The hearing was set for 9 o'clock a.m. sharp. The courthouse steps in Cook County were buzzing by 8 o'clock. Reporters lined the walkways, microphones extended like weapons, cameras snapping at every figure who might be tied to the now infamous Shed Boy case. News anchors had given Leo that nickname. Brutal, but unforgettable. Lennox hated it. Leo wasn't a headline. He was a boy still healing, still trembling when doors closed too hard. Inside courtroom 4B, the air was electric with tension. The state had filed a formal motion to begin investigating Judge Terence Malone for gross negligence and possible collusion in the approval of Leo Albright's guardianship. But Lennox hadn't come just to watch. He was taking the stand. Naomi Ellis stood at the front, her suit a stormy grey, her eyes colder than the marble columns that framed the courtroom. She spoke with the slow, deliberate power of someone who knew the weight of truth. "We're not here to relitigate Leo's trauma," Naomi said, voice low but carrying. "We're here to find out why, despite multiple red flags, no one stepped in. Why a boy was left to rot in a shed while people with badges and bench seats looked the other way." Judge Adkins, a newly appointed reformist, leaned forward. "You're alleging the state system willfully ignored warning signs?" "I'm not alleging," Naomi said. "I'm proving." Lennox rose and stepped forward. He didn't look like a CEO now. He looked like a father. Maybe not by blood, but certainly by instinct. "I'm not a lawyer," he said. "And I'm not a politician. I'm a man who found a child behind a locked door, and I want to know why none of you found him first." The silence that followed was suffocating. He continued. "A school counselor flagged Leo's withdrawal. Nothing happened. A pediatrician reported signs of emotional trauma. The file was closed. A neighbor called in a tip. It was ignored." He paused. "Meanwhile, Judge Malone signed a guardianship approval in less than 2 days. No home visit. No interview with the child. No follow-up." Whispers spread across the room. Lennox turned slightly. "That's not a system." "That's a machine. One that eats kids and prints paperwork." Judge Adkins nodded. "We'll hear from Judge Malone next." The bailiff called his name. Terence Malone entered with all the swagger of a man who'd never been challenged, until now. His suit was immaculate, his expression neutral. But his eyes betrayed him. They flickered toward Lennox with a hint of something unsteady. Regret. Or fear. Naomi didn't wait long to strike. "Judge Malone, did you review the full application packet for Carol Albright's guardianship of Leo?" "I did." "You're under oath."
His jaw tightened. Yes, I reviewed it. Naomi slid a file onto the bench. Then you can explain why the required home inspection form is blank. Why the psychological evaluation line reads, waived, and why a letter of character reference was signed by a woman who, we later discovered, died 4 years prior to the filing. The room gasped. Malone's face didn't move, but his knuckles whitened on the witness stand. Naomi's voice softened, dangerously so. Who was pressuring you, Judge Malone? Was it political? Financial? I don't recall, he said. Let me remind you. She snapped her fingers, and an assistant brought forward a second file. Bank records, she said. A trust account connected to a shell company that wired $10,000 to a fund linked to your wife's boutique. 6 days after you approved Carol Albright's petition. And that was the crack. The first one. The judge blinked, then looked down at the table. The collapse had begun. Outside the courtroom, Carol sat in a holding cell awaiting her pre-trial hearing. Her lawyer, a scrawny man named Burton Thales, wrung his hands. Carol, if you know anything about the judge's role, now is the time to talk. She laughed. Bitter. Hollow. I don't know anything except that nobody cared what I did until Mr. Billionaire decided to play savior. You're looking at 10 years, Burton warned. I made that boy useful, she snapped. No one else wanted him. At that moment, she had no idea Leo was watching the court session through a small tablet screen, flanked by his caseworker and Sarah. He didn't blink, didn't cry. Just stared, as if absorbing every word, every betrayal, every failure that let his pain stretch across 2 years of silence. That night, back at Lennox's penthouse, Leo stood near the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the glowing Chicago skyline. They're not supposed to be able to do that, he said. No, Lennox replied softly. They're not. Leo turned, eyes wide. But they did. And now they have to answer. Lennox crossed the room and knelt beside him. Yes. And you get to watch them do it. Not hidden, not alone. Not forgotten. Leo leaned his forehead against the glass. I used to think, if I screamed loud enough, someone would hear me. Lennox reached out and gently touched his shoulder. They heard you now. The trial was just the beginning. But Leo wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was about to become a voice. And for the first time, the monsters were running scared. It started with a phone call at 6:42 a.m. Lennox had just finished his morning run along the lakefront trail, sweat slicking his brow, the cold spring air biting at his lungs. His phone buzzed in his jacket pocket as he reached the front steps of his high-rise condo. The caller ID read, Naomi Ellis. That early, it could only mean one thing. Tell me it's good news, he said, not bothering with hello. There was a pause. They found a second child, Naomi said. Lennox stopped moving. The keycard in his hand hovered inches from the scanner. Where? A basement, south side. A boy named Andre, 7 years old, malnourished. Covered in bruises. Lennox's jaw tightened. Another Carol? Worse, Naomi whispered. The woman's a foster resource parent, contracted by the state. Andre wasn't even the only kid placed with her, but he's the one they missed, because he didn't go to school. He wasn't even on the books. A ghost. Lennox exhaled slowly. Tell me Leo doesn't know. He will. It's already online. By the time Lennox reached the apartment, Leo was seated on the living room floor, knees pulled to his chest, watching the morning news. The image on the screen was sickeningly familiar. A trembling child wrapped in a foil emergency blanket,
clinging to a paramedic. Headlines screamed beneath the image. Leo's case ignites statewide investigation. More children found in neglect. Lennox crouched beside him. "You okay?" Leo didn't look away from the screen. "It's not just me." "No," Lennox said. "It never was." Later that day, at Naomi's office downtown, the room buzzed with an urgency Lennox had come to recognize, the quiet before a system cracks. Charts littered the table, maps of foster care networks, red flags, funding lines, anonymous reports gone uninvestigated. Naomi paced, eyes dark with fury. "We've opened an audit of the Illinois Child Welfare Department, and already we've uncovered more anomalies. Fake home checks, rubber-stamped approvals. And now we have whistleblowers stepping up." Across the room, a woman with a tired face and a voice full of restraint cleared her throat. "I'm Rachel Quinn," she said. "I used to work intake at DCFS. I quit 2 months ago. Couldn't take it anymore." Naomi gestured for her to continue. "They'd overload our caseloads. Tell us to close files unless there was visible blood or a hospital visit. If a kid was dirty or scared, they'd tell us he was just adjusting. We were told not to look too hard. And if we pushed, we got reassigned." Lennox leaned forward. "Who told you that?" Rachel's hand trembled slightly as she reached into her purse and slid a USB drive across the table. "Everything's on here. Emails, internal memos, even call recordings." They knew. They all knew. Naomi picked it up like it was radioactive. "We need to go public," Lennox said. Naomi hesitated. "That's a big move. The media's already overloaded with Leo's story." "If we make this a war..." "It is a war," Lennox snapped. "And we have to treat it like one." That night, Lennox met Leo in the penthouse media room. The boy was curled under a blanket, watching a superhero cartoon but not really seeing it. The volume was down. The colors flickered across his face. "Can I show you something?" Lennox asked. Leo nodded. Lennox pulled up his laptop and opened a new video file. Raw, uncut footage Naomi's team had sent. Interviews, hidden camera clips, whistleblower testimonies. Leo watched in silence, eyes darkening with every second. "Why are you showing me this?" he finally whispered. "Because I want you to help me stop it." Leo blinked. "Me? You're the reason people started paying attention. Not because you were hurt, because you survived." "Because you spoke." Leo didn't answer. "I want you to come with me," Lennox continued, "to the hearing in Springfield next week. Lawmakers, child advocates, the press. We're going to propose something big, a reform bill, and a new independent watchdog council. But they need to see who they failed." Leo turned his head. "Will Carol be there?" "No, but the people who let her get away with it will." A long silence. Then Leo nodded once. "Okay, but I get to speak." Lennox blinked, stunned. "Are you sure?" Leo's voice was quiet, but firm. "They need to hear it from me." In the days that followed, the media firestorm reignited with fresh fuel. The headlines were no longer just about Leo. They were about the system. The broken gears. The children still lost. Leo's name trended again, but this time next to words like testimony, bravery, change. On the morning of the hearing, the state capitol rotunda was flooded with people. Cameras lined the back wall, legislators fidgeted in their seats. Child welfare officials looked like they were walking into a firing squad. Lennox took the microphone first, laying out the plan for reform. But it was Leo who silenced the room. He stepped to the podium, barely tall enough to reach the mic, his hands shaking only slightly. "My name is Leo Carter," he said. "I lived in a shed for 2 years, but I'm not here to talk about that."
I'm here to ask how many more kids have to be invisible before someone says enough. You could have heard a pin drop. I was 10. I was hungry. I was scared, but I still wanted someone to come. I still believed someone would. But no one did. Not the school, not the police, not the people who were supposed to check. A pause. Until someone finally did. He looked at Lennox. And now I'm standing here so no one has to wait as long as I did. The applause started slow. Then it roared. Lennox didn't clap. He was too busy wiping his eyes. Leo had just set the system on fire, and for the first time the people in charge couldn't look away. The morning after the hearing, Leo woke up to find the world had changed. His face was on the front page of every major newspaper across the country, not in a tabloid way, not sensationalized. It was the photo Naomi had taken moments after his speech, when he stepped away from the podium and into Lennox's quiet embrace. The headline read, "A boy named Leo, the voice that shook Springfield." But even with the media frenzy, Leo didn't feel triumphant. He felt exposed, like all the walls he had carefully built around himself, years of silence, survival, pretending he was invisible, were now glass. Everyone could see in. By lunchtime, Lennox's phone had buzzed more than 100 times. Calls from senators, emails from child advocates. Even a few from celebrities asking to amplify Leo's story. But Lennox ignored most of them, because Leo had disappeared, not literally. He was still in the penthouse, but emotionally, he'd checked out. Lennox found him in the rooftop garden, curled up beneath a tree, his head buried in his hoodie. He didn't speak, not when Lennox called his name, not when he sat down beside him. "You did something really brave yesterday," Lennox said after a long pause. Leo didn't move. "But I know that doesn't make the past go away." Silence. Then, softly, "I don't want to be the face of something. I just want to be a kid." Lennox looked out at the skyline, the buildings stark against the grey sky. "I get that." "No, you don't," Leo said, a sudden sharpness in his voice. He sat up, eyes shining with frustrated tears. "You're a billionaire. People listen to you. They see you coming and they move out of the way." "Me? They didn't even see me when I was dying." Lennox didn't flinch. He let the words hit. "You're right," he said quietly. "I don't know what it's like to be you, but I know what it's like to be invisible, even in a room full of people. I know what it's like to feel like nobody cares unless you make them." Leo wiped his nose on his sleeve. Lennox continued. "You don't have to carry this alone, not anymore. If you want to disappear from all this, say the word. I'll protect your privacy. I'll shut down the press. But if you still want to help the others, we'll do it on your terms." Leo stared at him. "You'd really make it go away? All of it?" "If that's what you want." There was a long pause. The wind rustled the leaves around them. Finally, Leo said, "What I want is to make sure no kid ever ends up like me again, but I want to do it my way." Lennox nodded. "Then we do it your way." That evening, as the city buzzed with praise and headlines, something else quietly ignited behind the scenes. Naomi called Lennox from a private number. "We've got a problem." Lennox stood in the kitchen, still barefoot, pouring Leo a glass of warm milk. "Tell me." "A leak. Someone from inside DCFS just sent us a trove of files, hundreds of pages. Internal emails, falsified inspection reports, bribes, and a name." Lennox stiffened. "Whose name?" "Congressman Peter Ellis, the same one who publicly praised Leo's courage yesterday."
Turns out, he's been covering up failures inside the agency for years. Dozens of cases buried. He took campaign money from a for-profit foster agency flagged multiple times. Lennox went cold.
He's Naomi's uncle.
Naomi's voice was barely a whisper.
Yeah, I know. You okay? No,
She said. But this isn't about me. It's about Leo, and every other kid the system ate alive. What do you need? A spotlight. We need to make this public before they bury it. You said we'd burn it down if we had to. I did, Lennox said. And we will. The next day, Lennox held a press conference outside the federal courthouse in Chicago. Leo didn't come. He watched from home, a blanket over his lap, Sir Reginald resting beside him like a silent talisman. Standing at the podium, Lennox looked straight into the cameras. We are not just dealing with neglect, he said. We're dealing with systemic rot, corruption. Men and women in power who profited while children suffered. And now, with the evidence we've received, we're calling for a full federal investigation into the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Lennox continued. We don't want apologies. We want accountability, no more loopholes, no more shadows. We are not going away. By nightfall, the story had gone national. Major networks ran it on the evening news. Hashtags trended. Anonymous sources came forward. A second whistleblower accused Congressman Ellis of directly interfering with CPS audits. Donations flooded Leo's newly created foundation. And in a quiet moment, Leo turned to Lennox and asked, Do you think they're scared now? Lennox looked at him and smiled, not with triumph, but with something deeper, a quiet pride. Yeah, kid, he said. I think they finally are. And somewhere deep inside Leo, beneath the pain, the fear, the years of silence, something fierce began to bloom. Not anger, not revenge. Power. The kind no one could ever take from him again. The courtroom was colder than Leo expected. Not because of the temperature, but the way the air hung tight with tension. The gallery was packed. Reporters lined the back wall, typing furiously, cameras rolling. Every seat filled with eyes waiting to see if this case, this boy, could bring down a giant. At the center of it all sat Congressman Peter Ellis, still in his crisp navy suit, still with that politician's smile that never quite reached his eyes. But for the first time, that smile faltered as the prosecution began to lay out the evidence. Leo sat beside Lennox and Naomi, his hands tightly folded in his lap. He wore a simple blue sweater, freshly ironed jeans, and his father's watch on his wrist, a bit too large, but grounding. His lawyer, Denise Holloway, had asked if he was sure he wanted to be there. I need to be, he'd told her. They need to see I'm not hiding anymore. On the stand, a former caseworker gave damning testimony. Pages of falsified reports. Claims of in-home visits that never happened. Children like Leo marked as safe while living in squalor, unseen. He threatened us, the caseworker said, her voice shaking. Said we'd lose funding. Told us to bury any case that would make the department look bad before re-election. We were supposed to protect kids. And we failed. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Ellis shifted in his seat, whispering rapidly to his attorney. But nothing could unring the bell. Naomi leaned toward Leo. That was the first domino. Good, Leo whispered. Let the rest fall. The trial moved quickly after that. Evidence mounted. Bank statements tracing diverted campaign funds, confidential memos from Ellis's office, whistleblower protection violations. One piece hit harder than the rest. A letter Ellis had personally written to block an emergency review of Leo's case, calling the boy's allegations unsubstantiated dramatics from a troubled child. Lennox's jaw tightened. When Naomi took the stand, the air changed.
She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She laid out everything, her discovery of the files, her connection to Ellis, and the decision to turn against him. "He's my uncle," she said plainly, "but what he did wasn't politics, it was cowardice." And kids suffered because of it. Ellis stared at her with something between betrayal and venom, but Naomi never looked away. That night, as the trial paused for recess, Leo found himself alone in the hallway, not by accident. He needed space, time to breathe. Everything felt heavier now that the truth was fully uncoiled, raw and exposed. A soft voice interrupted him. "Leo!" He turned. A woman stood there, maybe late 30s, dressed plainly. Her eyes were tired but warm. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said. "My name's Jenny. My son, Matthew. He was in the system too." "I wanted to thank you." Leo blinked. "For what?" "For speaking up. For not giving up." "They ignored my son's abuse report. Said it wasn't urgent. By the time someone checked, it was too late." Leo swallowed. "He died in that foster home last year." Silence. Then Leo stepped forward and hugged her. It was awkward, unsure, but real. She trembled in his arms. "You gave him a voice," she whispered, "even now." As she walked away, Leo stayed frozen in place. The weight in his chest was different now, not just grief, but responsibility. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. The next day, the jury reached its verdict in under 3 hours. Guilty, on every count. Child endangerment. Obstruction, fraud, conspiracy. The judge wasted no time in delivering the sentence, 25 years without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted, some in applause, others in stunned silence. Ellis just sat there, pale, defeated. Leo didn't smile. Not out of indifference, but something more complicated. Justice didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like the first breath after drowning. Afterward, as the crowd spilled out into the bright afternoon, a reporter called out, "Leo, how does it feel to know you took down a congressman?" Leo turned, his voice steady. "I didn't take him down. He did that to himself. I just stopped hiding." The answer made the front page again. But what mattered more was what came next. That evening, Leo stood in the middle of the community center where his foundation, the Let Them Be Seen project, was officially launching. The building buzzed with kids, social workers, lawyers, teachers. On one wall, an art mural stretched 10 feet wide, painted by children, inspired by their own stories. Lennox raised a glass of sparkling cider and clinked it against Leo's. "To truth," he said. "To voices that won't be ignored anymore," Leo replied. Then he paused, watching the crowd swirl around them. "This isn't the end, is it?" "No," Lennox said, smiling. "It's just the beginning." Leo looked up. The boy who once whispered to spiders in a shed now stood beneath chandeliers, surrounded by people who listened. And the future, for the first time in years, felt wide open. It started as a soft knock on the bedroom door, barely a sound. Leo looked up from his desk, where a stack of colored pencils lay scattered next to an open sketchbook. The drawing wasn't finished. It showed a boy standing at the edge of a forest, light spilling from behind him as shadows pulled away like fog. It looked a little like Leo. It looked a lot like what he felt. "You decent..." Lennox's voice came from the hallway, light but warm. "Yeah," Leo said, standing and brushing graphite from his fingertips. The door opened and Lennox stepped in, tie loosened, sleeves rolled. He looked more like a dad than a billionaire, something Leo had come to appreciate. "Naomi's downstairs. Says she needs your signature on something for the Foundation's newsletter." Leo smirked. "She's been making me write my own quotes lately." "Well,
Lennox said. People like hearing from the actual founder. Leo hesitated. Do they? Lennox sat on the edge of the bed. I know what you're thinking. That all of this, attention, praise, it feels weird, like you didn't ask for it. But kid, you earned this spotlight not because of what happened to you, but because of what you did with it. Leo nodded slowly. It was hard to reconcile the two versions of himself, the boy in the shed, and the boy who now stood in front of cameras and spoke to lawmakers, the one who'd been invisible for so long, now invited to speak on national panels about youth advocacy and child protection reform. I don't want them to forget the other kids, Leo said quietly. Matthew, Nina. All the names we don't know yet. They won't, Lennox said. You won't let them. Downstairs, Naomi handed Leo a stack of letters, thank you notes mostly. One was from a girl in Florida who'd seen him speak on TV. Your story gave me the courage to tell mine, it read. My aunt is going to jail now too. Thank you for helping me find my voice. Leo stared at the letter for a long time. Then he picked up a pen and started writing back. The next few months were a blur of momentum. The Let Them Be Seen project was expanding rapidly. State partnerships, legal clinics, training programs for social workers, and community-led hotlines. Leo's name was everywhere, but behind all of it was a team. Naomi leading strategy, Lennox funding infrastructure, and a growing network of volunteers determined to make sure no child slipped through the cracks again. But with recognition came backlash. Online trolls mocked Leo's story. Conservative talk shows accused him of exaggeration. One article claimed he was a media-manufactured martyr. When Naomi showed him the worst of it, Leo just sighed. Let them talk. I lived it. They didn't. Still, there were days it wore him down. That's when Lennox surprised him with a road trip. You need a reminder, he said. They drove upstate, no press, no schedules, just them, the highway, and the wide open sky. Lennox didn't say where they were going. Leo asked 3 times. He got 3 different answers. When they finally pulled into a small town with rows of modest homes and a school no bigger than a city block, Lennox parked in front of an old building with peeling blue paint. What is this? Lennox grinned. This used to be my elementary school. Come on. Inside, the principal, a bright-eyed woman with tight curls and a quicker laugh, welcomed them both. She walked them through the halls, showed them the new literacy center funded by the foundation, a room full of books and beanbags, artwork from kids on the walls. Stories that started with pain, but ended in growth. In the corner was a plaque, in honor of Leo Carter, for reminding us to never stop looking, to never stop listening. Leo stood frozen for a moment, then blinked, then smiled. That evening they sat on a bench outside a small diner. Sun dipping low, the horizon bruised with gold and lavender. Lennox handed him a vanilla milkshake and stole 1 sip before Leo could protest. You think it ever gets easier? Leo asked. Lennox was quiet for a moment. Some parts, yeah. Others, not so much, but you get stronger. You build muscle around the pain. Leo took a sip and nodded. I still dream about her sometimes. Aunt Carol. The shed. That's okay, Lennox said. Dreams are just leftovers. They don't define you. I'm not scared of her anymore, Leo said. But I'm scared of becoming numb, of forgetting what it felt like, so I stop fighting. You won't, Lennox said, because you remember what it cost. You know what it's worth. Months later, Leo stood before Congress. 18 now, taller, confident. He wore a navy blazer, his father's watch, and a pin on his lapel that read, "Visibility is protection." "My name is Leo Carter," he said. "When I was 10, I was locked in a shed for 2 years.
And no one saw me, not because I was invisible, but because the system refused to look. The room was silent. I'm not here because I want sympathy. I'm here because there are still kids like me out there, and they can't afford for you to look away." The bill passed with bipartisan support. Afterward, Leo walked outside into the sunlight. Cameras flashed, people clapped, but what mattered more was the small voice he heard behind him.
"You're Leo, right?" A boy, 9, maybe 10. Brown curls.
Nervous smile. "My mom's been hurting me," the boy whispered, "but I told my teacher."
"Because of you." Leo knelt and looked the kid in the eye. "You did the brave thing. I'm proud of you." That night, Leo wrote a post. "Just a few words. Don't wait until someone screams. Listen when they whisper." The post went viral, but Leo didn't check the numbers. He didn't care. He was already working on the next plan. The shed no longer defined him, but it would always remind him. And that was enough. If this story touched your heart, please share it. Not for views, but for voices. Let this be the one that makes someone look closer, listen longer, or speak up louder, because somewhere right now, a child is whispering. And we have the chance to hear them.